Hey everybody, it's Catherine Middlebrooks of BRV Yoga, and today I want to talk about why some of the traditional hip openers that we do often, a lot in yoga, might not be serving your post-baby body. So let's dive into this topic. So first things first, I will fully admit, as a new yoga teacher, I used to love putting people into some long hip openers. So the poses I'm talking about are things like half pigeon, Baddha Konasana, that butterfly pose, like poses where we are externally rotating one leg to open up the hips. There's lots of other hip openers, but usually when you go to a yoga class and we talk about hip openers, that's often what you see. And you'll see a lot of it, people holding you there for a long time. Now that I know better, I do better. And when I see that happening, I tend to cringe because I know that for most bodies, that's probably not really helping. And especially in a postpartum body, and remember, postpartum is forever, that is really not going to be the solution to ongoing hip tightness or hip discomfort. So let's talk about this today. Okay, so first things first, I have said this before, but I want to reiterate. Pregnancy creates very specific patterns of muscular imbalances in your body. And these muscular imbalances create some wonkiness in certain parts of the body. I talk about this a lot related to the core, but it also relates to the hips. So let's talk about what those are, and then I'll talk about why with those imbalances, these hip openers aren't helping you. Okay, so what happens in pregnancy? Well, typically the baby grows, your core gets weaker. Now, traditionally, the role of the core is, yes, it's a muscle that helps you move, but it also is responsible for creating stability in your spine. You have tone in your muscles in the abdomen so that the spine isn't wobbling all over the place. And right, if the spine is too flexible, too loose, it sets you at risk for herniated discs and back stuff. We don't want that. So the core serves as a primary spine stabilizer. It keeps that spine relatively steady and healthy. But when a baby grows, the core gets weak, other parts of the body have to pick up the slack for the core that's no longer doing its job. So to a certain extent, the back muscles get really tight, but also a hip flexor starts taking over. And if you have heard me talk before, you've probably heard me talk about the psoas. So this psoas is a muscle that is traditionally a hip flexor. So it basically connects right to your back here, right on your vertebrae. It wraps around the front of your body and actually connects into your inner thigh. And it's designed to flex your hip, right? To lift your leg up and drop it down. However, when the core gets weak, it starts doing a different job. So the psoas can actually start to kind of lock down in order to create spinal stability, right? It connects to the vertebra. So it is able to help stabilize the spine. So when the core gets weak, the psoas starts getting tighter and it starts doing a job that it's not really made to do. Okay, so that's happening at the level of the torso, right? So we've gotten pregnant. Now we have a psoas, hip flexor, that's not doing its job because it's trying to create stability in the body. So that's one part of it. Now the other thing is that the core muscles, if you think about it, I'm not really set up to show this well, but right, the core connects to your pelvis. So my chair almost fell off my stair. The core muscles literally go from your rib cage down to your pelvis. So the core plays a huge role in also creating stability in your pelvis, right? When a pelvis is too loosey-goosey, that also puts the spine at risk, puts the hips at risk. Like there's a lot, you don't want a lot of movement in that pelvis. But when the core gets weak, it's not able to create that stability in the pelvis in the same way. So there's another muscle that also starts locking down, and this is called the TFL. Now, the TFL is basically on your outer hip right here, kind of where your pant pockets are. And this muscle is primarily responsible for externally rotating the leg, so turning the leg out. However, when the core gets weaker, the TFL starts doing a job, again, that it's not made to do. It starts locking down to help create stability in the pelvis, to keep the pelvis from being really wobbly and loosey-goosey. So now we have the TFL doing a job that it's not meant to do, working really hard. We also have the psoas working really hard to do a job it's not made to do. So now we have these muscles that are tight and overactive, right? And when a muscle is tight and overactive, it's not that it's like super strong. Often it's tight, but also weak because it can't take its full range of motion. But we don't need to get into that today. Okay, so now we have these muscles working overtime. But when one part of the system changes, it starts impacting all of the other parts of the system, right? We're a holistic body. All the parts work together. So when the psoas is working overtime, when the TFL is working overtime, particularly the TFL is a bit of a bully. So when this outer hip starts working really hard to stabilize the pelvis, it actually is a bully for the glutes. So it starts turning off the glute muscles. This is one of the reasons why a lot of women, after they have a baby, they've lost their butt, because that TFL shuts off the glute muscles. Now, the glute muscles are also responsible for pelvis stability, and also responsible for turning that leg outward. So the glutes shut off. Now the pelvis is again like, oh, I'm a little unstable. So now other muscles start kicking in. And often this can be something like the pelvic floor. So sometimes the pelvic floor will get really tight because the glutes are weak. So the pelvic floor is trying to create stability of the pelvis from the bottom because the glutes aren't doing their job anymore. Also, some of the deep rotators of the hips, things like the piriformis, will start taking over. And so those can get really tight again because they're trying to help you, right? We sometimes think about these tight muscles as like, oh, these tight muscles, I can't get rid of them. But really, these tight muscles are trying to protect your body from instability. So the piriformis will get tight. Just one other note about that TFL on the outside of the hip, it actually connects right into your IT band. So if you're someone who either kind of post-pregnancy has started to have IT band flare-ups, odds are then that that is a very tight area of your body. Okay, now pregnancy can create these imbalances, but pregnancy can also exacerbate underlying imbalances that were already there. So you might have had some of these issues to a lesser extent, then you get pregnant and you like feel it a lot. Okay, so that's where we are. We've now talked about all of these muscles that are doing different jobs than they should be doing, muscles that have shut off other muscles. And basically what we have is that now hip muscles are working really hard to create stability in the spine and pelvis instead of doing the job of the hip, which is to bend the leg and turn the leg in and out. Okay, so what happens? Your experience of that, if your body is feeling like those muscles are always tight, right? If you're someone who's like, oh my God, my hips are always tight no matter how much I stretch them. This is because those muscles are working overtime, okay? So then what do? Well, we often will be like, oh, I've got to stretch these muscles. So then you go to stretch, go stretch those muscles, and you'll go into that half pigeon where you're rotating your leg out. This is going to stretch the external rotators, and in half pigeon, you're also stretching the leg behind you. I'll throw a picture in of half pigeon if you're not familiar with it. But what are you doing when you're stretching, right? You think you're trying to help your body, but in fact, what you are doing, you're taking these muscles that are serving this purpose of creating stability in your body, and you are now asking them to lengthen and get longer. Now, if you think about that, what are you doing to your body? You're now basically destabilizing the entire system. So you've taken these muscles that are like, I'm working really hard to create stability, and now I'm stretching them and making them longer. And if all you're doing is stretching them, you've now destabilized your whole system, and the body wants stability. So what does it do? It starts upregulating all of that tightness. That's why when you stretch, it doesn't last. You feel good for like a few minutes, and then later that day, it's all tightened back up again. And sometimes it's even tighter because you have now created this destabilized system. And so the body's like, I've got to turn all these muscles up even more to create stability, which turns the glutes off more, which then makes the pelvic floor get tighter, right? It's just this terrible feedback system. It's a big, lovely mess that we have created. So what's the alternative? So if this is something that you're struggling with, and I want you to know that this is the case whether you feel kind of chronically tight or if you feel chronically unstable. I know a lot of people in their pelvis will feel like stuff is always popping in and out. Well, again, that is most likely a response of certain muscles. The stability muscles are weak. Other muscles are tight and they'll pull the pelvis one way or another. So even if you're not feeling chronically tight, this stuff applies to you. So what your body needs is not more stretching. Your body needs to be rebalanced. You need to be able to create strength in the muscles that are weak so that you can give your body that stability, so that then those overly worked and over tight muscles can relax and chill out a little bit. So it's not a function of doing more hip openers, doing more stretching. Yes, stretching plays a role, but more than that, it's creating balance in the whole system. And as you can see, right, I'm talking about lots of parts of the body. So it's not just the hips. The hips are related to the core, they're related to the glutes, and then all of the muscles of the legs even. So there's a lot that you have to think about balancing. Okay, so good news, if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is crazy overwhelming, where do you even start? I have a free workshop coming up next week all about creating happy, healthy hips. So it's going to be a 3-part video series where we really talk through kind of what's happening in your body, what you can do to rebalance it. And it's going to be such a great workshop. I'm so excited for it. I've been working on it for a long time, and I'm just really excited to put this information out there. So I'm going to throw the link below. Anybody who's interested, anybody who's struggling with ongoing hip pain, discomfort, super tightness, super loosey-goosey hips, all of that, it's going to relate to all of that. So sign up. Again, it's totally free, and we'll get started next Wednesday. So let me know if you have any questions about this, about the hips in general. Most of it will be answered in the workshop, I'm sure. But please do let me know if this resonated and if it makes sense. And I see Renee's comment, my IT band has always been so tight, and now post-baby, it is so tight. Yeah. That TFL is working to create stability and pulling on your IT band. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining me today, and I will hopefully see you all in the workshop next week. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, too. Enjoy this long weekend with your family. Okay, bye.